What is going on, GBA? I am the Confusion, and we are back to bring you guys the weekly recap for week 7 of season 7 of the GBA. And as you all know, I am not alone to cover the recaps this week. I am here with...
Yeah, buddy! It's O-Spastic One! Hello, Lucky 7. Let's do this.
I'm happy for this. We got week 7, we got season 7. It is a lot of hype. So, as we kind of peek over the halfway mark, we have our first battle of week 7 being Dan versus Mono Tui, and Dan is bringing his Gliscor, his Scizor, his Haxorus, Victini, Toxapex, Terrakion, and Mono is bringing his Zygarde, his Jirachi, his Buzzwole, his Miltank, his Salazzle, and his Greninja. Now, right off the bat, we have two ground types up against each other, and I know this doesn't really affect the game too much, but it was really funny to see Mono bring the Power Construct Zygarde by accident. He brought that in, and it kind of went off during that first turn, so we kind of had to redo that. But not too important. I just thought that was pretty humorous. But Gliscor actually was able to really heavily dent that Zygarde with the Ice Fang. Really unexpected. Mono did not expect an Ice Fang. He was just expecting to click that Bandit 1000 Arrows and kill something, because when you looked at Dan's team, he really suffered from having no 1000 Arrow switch-ins, especially once that thing is banded. So Dan really had trouble playing around that, but at the same time, Mono had a lot of trouble playing around the Terrakion. So in my opinion, it really felt like whenever one of those Mons came in, something had to go down, something had to be sacked. But Mono definitely had the advantage early on in the game. I don't think you can argue that, especially with 1000 Arrows just taking out the Gliscor turn 2. Like, that thing went down. It only was able to do a half back to the Zygarde with the Ice Fang, but going down really hindered Dan's performance, in my opinion. After that, the Buzzwole is able to come in, and it is able to actually kill the Scizor, also really throwing Dan off. Like, that is already a 4-6 game, so it's really not looking good for Dan. But as the game continues, you do have Terrakion able to come in and get a kill. So, like I said earlier, when Terrakion comes in, Mono is usually going to have to sack something if he does not make the right play, and same for Dan. If the Zygarde comes in, he's really going to have to sack something, and that's exactly what happened when it came in on the Terrakion. He did have to sack his Toxapex, so he's already down 3 Mons in probably what is the first 5 turns of the game, which is something you don't see that happen. As a team with a lot of bulk like Toxapex, Miltank, you don't expect 3 Mons to go down so quickly, especially if something isn't even set up. So that is really here to show you the momentum and how quick this game is going, with how much damage output is being thrown around. It's really crazy. But as we see at the end, Terrakion is able to come in again after the Toxapex goes down and is finally able to kill that Zygarde because Mono just has no more switch-ins. So that's a really good relief for Dan, because he does not have to deal with the 1000 Arrows anymore, but there's a lot more threats on Mono's team, like we're going to see later on. The Terrakion on the Salazzle, the quick attack, that was a really good play. Mono even agreed having that quick attack to be able to knock out that Salazzle before it could do any more damage to the Terrakion was really important, so that later on it could survive the Water Shuriken. So I'm quickly going to mention that play. Mono had a few different plays he could have done. He could have went for the Hydro Pump, he could have switched into the Jirachi, or he could have clicked Water Shuriken, deciding how to kill that Terrakion, that last turn. I'm going to go back to a few more turns before, but I just want to talk about this because I brought it up. The Water Shuriken, in my opinion, was a fine play. Every play had a chance to not work out for Mono, so it really didn't matter, guys. Hacks is a part of the game, and the Water Shuriken has a chance to only hit twice. It has a chance to get low rolled. If that's what happens, that's what happens, and that does end up losing Mono the game. I mean, it's just how it is. It's that simple. So that eventually does lead to Dan being able to get 2 more kills with that Terrakion, and that is absolutely crazy. I also want to quickly mention Mono's misplay. He did have one misplay which I noticed, which he noticed, which is very noticeable. As the Terrakion quick attacked the Salazzle, Mono should have gone into his Miltank, because Miltank handled the rest of Dan's team, barring the Victini and his Focus Blasts. if Miltank came in on the Terrakion, I mean, it was locked into quick attack. It really couldn't do much. If Miltank clicked EQ as Dan switches into the Victini would have went down because of the Chopper Berry. Miltank could have easily took that Focus Blast as we saw it did, and would have been able to handle the Terrakion by switching around it and easily take on that Haxorus. So that's a big misplay in my opinion that could have lost him the match. But regardless, he did end up making the play into the Jirachi, and that ended up happening. So it is a 1-0 loss for Mono, his second loss. I'm assuming he's going to bounce back. I really can't see him losing now on a lose streak because of how well he did so early on into the season, but we will just have to see. What do you think about it, Spastic?
Terrakion, oh my Lanta, that power. I mean, like, once Terrakion gets on a good streak, very few things can stop it, and especially on Mono's team. Once Zygarde went down, Buzzwole went down, there wasn't a whole lot he could... Yeah, Greninja could have taken it down. Water Shuriken was the smart play, but it didn't end up working out in his favor, and the Terrakion just cleaned up house. So, Terrakion is a great offensive presence that I don't think gets enough love. Sometimes it's a great... powerful tier 1 that doesn't even get drafted, but Dan's used Terrakion in the past. He's very comfortable with it, and he will show again. I guarantee that he will show how powerful Terrakion can be before this season is out. I mean, this was just one example, picking up 4 clean kills. Moving on to the next match, we're going to jump straight into the Borussia Donphan versus the Free State Torracats. Lars bringing Magearna, Rotom-Heat, Nihilego, Primarina, Donphan, and Mesprit, while Duncan brings Keldeo, Landorus Incarnate, Marowak Alolan, Torkoal, Venusaur, and Metagross. Now, for starters, quick shout out to Lady Kubu, the nickname for Primarina. Yay, cool, high wit. So, speaking of Primarina, early prediction. Lars knew that Duncan was going to switch into Venusaur on Primarina, so he went for the Ice Beam, dealing a nice chunk of damage. But this is where things also get interesting. Torkoal came in, set up the Sun. With the Heat Rock, that thing was going to last 8 turns. Growth Venusaur with Chlorophyll. Not only did he get off of Growth, boost his attack and special attack by 2, but his speed was already doubled, which allowed it to outspeed Scarf, Rotom-Heat, and Nihilego, which really came in handy for Duncan, as Venusaur would end up getting 2 very nice kills. Now, Lars bringing in Mesprit was a good play, and using the Healing Wish to restore Nihilego not only brought it back up to full, it was almost dead at that point. Healing Wish brought it back up to full, and it ended up stalling out the last turn of Sun, forcing Venusaur out and allowing Lars to get back in without worrying about the Sun. Now, Duncan ended up bringing in Torkoal as his only Rapid Spinner to get rid of the rocks that Donphan had set up on his side of the team, on his side of the field. And I mean, Torkoal with the Heat Rock setting up the Sun was a good chunk of Duncan's game plan, and the fact that Torkoal was sacked off to remove the rocks, it could have really benefited him in the end. I mean, or he could have gone for the Solar Beam without the charge time and taken out the Primarina. There are many things that could have happened there, but him ensuring that the rocks were off his side of the field so that Alolan Marowak and Keldeo could come in and finish up the game without that chip damage. It was a good move, as was Lars sacrificing Nihilego to make room for Donphan to come in and take out the Venusaur with an Ice Shard. So, a couple of good plays there, a couple of good sacrifices, and Lars trying to set up and clear the way so that Magearna could come in, set up a Trick Room, and then just proceed to take out Metagross and Marowak. But he sets up the Trick Room, as Duncan switches into Alolan Marowak, and Marowak is slower. The Trick Room ended up working out in Duncan's favor. Flare Blitz took out Magearna handily. There were a couple of things that Lars could have done. Lars could have fired off a Shadow Ball instead, taken out Marowak, taken out Metagross. Even he admitted he goofed, which, again, coaches recognizing misplays and what they could have done differently. I really like that. Even if they did mess up, I like when they recognize that they messed up and they will learn. And like, this whole season is going to be a learning experience for everyone, even the veteran coaches. So, yeah, great plays by Duncan, great game by Lars. What do you think?
Yeah, I gotta say, as well as Lars did handle that game to the full extent that he could, I was so impressed by Duncan's play. Like you said, the Alolan Marowak, being that it was a brave, negative nature speed, so slow, was super beneficial for him. With the Trick Room, that definitely benefited him, allowing him to Flare Blitz that Magearna and just knock it out before it could do any Trick Room shenanigans. He played really well with the Sun, in my opinion. The Venusaur Torkoal, just proving how scary Torkoal can be. You saw how well it took the Scalds from Primarina. So it was really impressive to see that thing able to Rapid Spin on it, take around like 30% from a Scald. A Torkoal taking 30% from a Scald, that was unheard of before Gen 7. So I think Duncan is now beginning to get a feel for the Venusaur Torkoal Sun team. I think it's a really good strategy and is very hard to prepare for. And because he has been using it so much, I think opponents are not as likely to prepare fully for it. Like Dan misplayed that once by not preparing for it, and Lars obviously not preparing to his fullest extent. He did prepare for it, but not as much as he needed to. Venusaur was able to do a lot of damage, just click Giga Drain, click Sludge Bomb. Luckily Lars was able to play around that so it didn't sweep him, but still on Duncan's end that was really powerful. The Metagross being able to handle the Donphan with the Ice Punch, the Landorus doing a lot of damage. So I was really impressed with the way he played that game, but obviously Lars did as much as he can to preserve his differential. So moving on to the next game, we have the Philadelphia Scissors up against the San Francisco Arcaniners. Chimp bringing Cofagrigus, Azumarill, Dugtrio, Kyurem Black, Gligar, and Thundurus Incarnate. And George is bringing his Togekiss, Suicune, Drapion, Mismagius, Mew, and the Garchomp. Now, right off the bat, we have Chimp just knocking out the Drapion with 2 Thunderbolts from the Thundurus. Now, what ends up happening, though, is Drapion is able to get a knockoff. George just clicked knockoff. George is able to see that it's a Z move Thundurus because he does not see an item. Now, although that knockoff seems insignificant because he wasn't able to get an item off while Drapion had to go down to the Thunderbolt, I actually think it really helped him win this game. I think it was so important to him winning this game, and we'll talk about that as we get to that moment. I'll bring it up again, but we do see later on that the Togekiss is really an annoyance to Chimp's team. He recognizes that a Scarf Togekiss is going to be a huge problem. George notices that a Scarf Togekiss can really put in the work, so he brings that thing in relatively early up against the Cofagrigus. Chimp didn't misplay, but I feel he missed out on a few opportunities to click knockoff to get rid of that Choice Scarf just because of how powerful it did handle his team. It was a really strong force, just being able to flinch. We all know what Togekiss does. It clicks Air Slash and flinches like 95% of the time. So that thing's an absolute monster, and you know, Chimp's priority was to make sure he knocked that thing off. He does later on do that with the Azumarill, so that's very, very nice, making sure that the Kyurem can outspeed, the Thundurus can outspeed, because otherwise Air Slash shenanigans is not something very fun to play against. Something I do want to bring up is the Mew set. Although Chimp recognizes that clicking knockoff on the Togekiss is important, George realizes that setting up with Mew could be really important and could win him that game. But luckily for Chimp, he does bring a pretty fat Azumarill with the Parasong, so it is able to take a good amount of hits from the Togekiss and not get 2-hit KO'd, and even from a +1 Psychic from that Mew, it is not 2-hit KO'd, and Parasong does quickly put that thing on a timer, even though it's behind a sub. Parasong does go through that, so good prep on Chimp's side. I'm not sure he'd prepared for that, but the Parasong definitely came in handy, even though the Superior wasn't around. So I thought that was a good prep on Chimp's part. We also see more Pokemon not being so useful on George's end. The Suicune really doing nothing that game. Kyurem Black is able to click Ice Beam and Fusion Bolt to bring that thing down, and although Suicune does click Ice Beam a number of times and bring the Kyurem Black around half health, Kyurem Black is carrying the roost, so Suicune really not doing anything. Togekiss becomes less useful once the Cho Scarf is knocked off, so George does look like he's at a disadvantage at the moment, but we'll see later why he's not. Later on, we see that Mew is able to set up another Combine and take out the Dugtrio, but Dugtrio does not go down before clicking EQ. Now that damage is really important because the Thundurus does have Z Dark Pulse. Now because the Mew set up a Calm Mind, that Z Dark Pulse might not have killed if the Dugtrio did not use Earthquake, but because it did, Chimp is able to catch George really off guard. George was not prepared for the Z Dark Pulse. Yes, the Z Thunderbolt, he knew he could take that, but the Dark Hole Eclipse was not on his radar and is able to take out what he considered at the moment to be his win condition. George, however, was able to use Garchomp to get some last-minute hits onto the Gligar, onto the Kyurem Black, leaving Mismagius there to kill the last 3 Mons with Shadow Ball on a Choice Spec set, being able to match the San Francisco Arcaniners, the close 1-0 win. Even though Chimp thought he had that in the bag, he looked like he had that in the bag, but George was able to snatch it with the Choice Specs Mismagius. Great prep on both ends. Really turning the tides at the end, George. Very impressive, but what did you think of that game?
Chimp is really utilizing Thundurus really well as his Z captain. And he's not just bringing the same predictable Z moves. Like we saw him bring Supersonic Sky Strike against Mono, ending his whole line of Roserades. Yeah, but bringing the Z Dark Pulse, knowing that it could do a lot of damage to George's team, really good play on his part. To see these coaches play with their Z captains and actually utilize the Z moves, it's nice to see how League format is adapting to Z crystals as a new mechanic in format. I mean, last season, season 5, season 6, it was megas. Coaches getting used to mega evolutions. Now it's Z crystals. Although Mismage is coming in at the end and just choice spec using everything to keep him calm. Nice to see. I mean, in traditional League format, it's a tier 5, but it coming in and cleaning up house, really nice to see from a considerably lower tier. But the next game we talk about is going to be the Florida Gators versus the Pittsburgh Piratas. Gator brings Diggersby, Heatran, Mamoswine, Galvantula, Pyukumuku, and Latios, while Tup brings Staraptor, Nidoking, Slowking, Hitmontop, Chandelure, and Tapu Koko. Now, right off the bat, Nidoking versus Mamoswine at the very beginning. Tup going for the Earth Power on Mamoswine. Not really sure what he was hoping to accomplish, unless he was hoping for a switch, but Mamoswine not taking a whole lot of damage from the Earth Power, and then killing Nidoking in one hit with an Earthquake. It was a ballsy play or a misclick, but it cost Tup big time. He lost his rocker. He lost one of his strongest special attackers. Oh no, it wasn't a rocker, it was a Toxic Spike set running Black Sludge. But he still lost a good strong special attacker. But he did manage to get a Toxic, Hitmontop managed to get a Toxic on the Latios, forcing Gator to be a little more defensive with the switches. But there was also a whole lot of U-turning from both coaches, especially Tup. Tup trying to get some U-turning with Staraptor and Tapu Koko, making sure momentum stays in his favor. But a big hiccup on Tup's part when he clicks Flame Charge, when Chandelure clicks Flame Charge in front of a Heatran. Now, it ended up not having a huge effect on the game. In reality, I mean, yeah, Flash Fire went off, Chandelure didn't get the +1, but Heatran got the rocks up and then lived an HP ground from Chandelure and then just killed it with Earth Power. After that, Gator just kept control of the whole match, allowing Mamoswine to just come in and finish up Tup's team, getting 4 solid kills. Staraptor getting a kill for Tup's team, taking out the really low health Heatran. But after that, Mamoswine comes in. If I'm not mistaken, he was indeed running an AV set. So Mamoswine comes in, finishes off Tup's team. Really not a whole lot to say about this game, aside that, I mean, it's a tough 5-0 loss for Tup. I really hope he can pull out some kind of momentum. At this point, I'm not sure if he even has a prayer for playoffs, but like, Tup is still a good battler. I get the feeling he's not completely comfortable with his team, and it's unfortunate to see, but I mean, I hope he can really get the swing of things by the end of the season. I think he might get the hang of it towards the end. I hope. I mean, I don't know about you.
Yeah, you can just tell that we're struggling here. Like, we're trying to stay with Tup, but he's really not showing us any glimmer of hope. I mean, we're 7 weeks in and he still cannot like manage a win. And I know he has tough opponents and the team is not for him, but we're still like kind of like hoping, like, come on Tup, we know you can snatch a win. And I highly doubt we are going to go a full season without Tup getting a win. I don't see that happening, but he needs to get a win, please. Like, for my sanity, just get Tup, please win. But yeah, Tup did not play as best as he could. He made a lot of predictions. He likes to predict, but for some reason it just not work out with Gator. He was making strong aggressive moves, and he just had the right team, in my opinion. Tup tried to bring some interesting, fun sets, but it just didn't, like the Chandelure, but it just doesn't work out. Mamoswine being a huge threat. I can understand why Tup didn't overly prepare for the Mamoswine, because Gator has not been using it to its full advantage, but clearly you can see that he knows how to in this game. So moving on to the next game, it is the Detroit Steel Wings up against the New Orleans Pelipper's. Chase bringing his Slowbro, the Volcarona, the Tornadus, the Cobalion, the Serena, and the Kyurem, and John is bringing the Jolteon, Milotic, Scolipede, Gudra, Uxie, and Inferni. Now, right off the bat, John is actually bringing 2 Assault Vest users, which is something you don't see too often, but with Pokemon like Sylveon, Tornadus, and Volcarona, and Slowbro, you can see why he did that, and it definitely worked out for him first turn with the Assault Vest Jolteon. That thing was just able to destroy any chance of Volcarona sweeping, let alone the second Assault Vest using Gudra in the back. Like, Volcarona's chances of sweeping were not too well, so maybe leading off with it was not the best choice, maybe waiting for a few Pokemon to become more weakened, but even then it didn't matter too much because the Infernape was even Scarfed and could outspeed and had Stone Edge, so it was just not the match for Volcarona. John prepared heavily for it, and it ended up working out for him because the Jolteon is able to get 2 HP rocks off on that thing. Wasn't able to kill it because of the Quiver Dance supporting its special defense, and even then the Fire Dance off of the +1 only did around half, maybe a little bit more, 60%-ish. So really just easily handling that Volcarona. Props to John on that. But this is what I like to call a classic match. And you might hear me say that a couple of times, so this is your definition for you. What I consider a classic match is just a game with toxic and just attacks. It's who can click enough attacks in which one team falls down first. There's no crazy setup, there's no crazy sets, it's just a lot of damage output, and this was that. This was a game of Slowbro clicking toxic, of Serena coming in, Gudra clicking its coverage like normal, a pretty normal game. The Kyurem was physical, which was really cool. It could have handled the Gudra much easier because it was physical. The Milotic actually got toxic and could probably take those hits better because of the Marvel scale. The Cobalion was Choice Scarfs, which definitely helped Chase, in my opinion. It was a really, really good set. It could come in, click close combat in most situations, even had Volt Switch for the momentum. So if you really didn't think the Jolteon was going to come in, which it normally wouldn't because it's not a switch into close combat, maybe if you predicted Iron Head, but it was able to click Volt Switch sometimes. Close combat normally do a lot of damage to the Milotic, do a lot of damage to pretty much everything that it was able to come in on. But after most, I'm just flipping my notes over here. After the Slowbro was able to, do a lot of damage to the Milotic, the Yuxi, the Guja, taking things down, once it came down to the very, very end, it was the Infernape versus the Cobalion. Both were choice scarfed, except for the fact that Cobalion was adamant and not jolly, and wasn't even fully invested in speed, so it could not outspeed the Infernape, and Infernape was able to collect close combat and finish that game off very, very narrowly with a 1-0. Very, very similar to how week 1 went against Mono Tui for Chase. This is another game for him in which John just had, the better set in this matchup, because Infernape could also take a close combat even if it was a speed tie, even if it was a regular 252 attack close combat versus Infernape only does 83% at max, and the Infernape was at full health. So regardless, the Infernape definitely came out of that matchup alive, and that ended up giving the John the win. So congrats to him, he played a really good game. Chase also playing a really phenomenal game. He kept his Mons around, he whittled the John's team down, but John also just made the right plays. Oh, I forgot to mention the Curum got burned because of Gujo's Flamethrower. Just a little bit of hacks didn't matter too much because the Milotic was toxic at that point and could take a Dragon Claw, but just something I wanted to mention. What did you think, Spastic?
I like the label of a classic match, because it definitely does harken back to first gen when, yeah, you've got toxic, but there weren't a whole lot of setup moves. Like, it wasn't the crutch of the metagame. So just to watch two teams just go into a full-on knockdown, drag-out brawl almost, it was really nice to see. Like, it did feel like a classic match. It felt like both coaches just giving everything they had, and John pulling out a narrow win. Props to him for bringing like AV Jolteon and making it look great. Like, Jolteon is not a bulky mon, but John bringing AV Jolteon with just enough investment to allow it to live hits. It's interesting. I really like it. It's something I'm probably going to consider from here on out. But it really worked out in his favor. Chase mixing it up, bringing a physical Q room. Not that common of a set, but it is perfectly possible because Q room does have even offenses of 130 and 130 for attack and special attack, unlike its black or white forms. But moving on to the next match, we're going to talk about, we'll save that one for last. We'll talk about the Milwaukee Sawsbucks versus the Utah Jasmine. Necrostevo bringing Swellow, Breloom, Scrafty, Hippowdon, Klefki, and Manaphy, while BattleRx brings Xurkitree, Kartana, Meloetta, Starmie, Mimikyu, and Kommo-o. Now right off the bat, Klefki does what Klefki does best. Sets up dual screens and 2 layers of spikes. Like, Prankster Klefki, it's what it does best, and Stevo utilizing it to its best potential, getting both screens up. With, granted, he wasn't running like Clay, but he still worked with it, got his screens up, got the spikes up, which really hurt BattleRx's team. All that whittling down, all that chip damage, especially for his bulkier mons like Meloetta. So that was good on Stevo's part, letting Klefki does what it does early in the game. Now Scrafty coming in and taking out Starmie with a Scarf Bullet Seed. Really helpful, because Starmie could have really done a lot of damage to Stevo's team. Like, even though it was his primary rocker, his spinner, Starmie was his spinner. Not sure why he didn't get rid of the spikes. He probably meant to. I'm sorry, I didn't see the match from X's perspective. I apologize. I'm working 2 jobs, trying to get all this. Oh my god. So Breloom took it out before it could even have the chance to spin things away. Scarf Breloom, catching it off guard. Red card Mimikyu. I want to talk about that real quick. It is a great idea. BattleRx had that prep, and I really felt like it could have gone off better, but given that Swellow was already using U-turn, it didn't exactly work as BattleRx wanted, and ultimately the set just fell pretty quickly. So Mimikyu not getting to do what it wanted to do, unfortunate, but a great idea. BattleRx getting really creative with his sets. Real quick, I want to make a mention about Z move Manaphy. Whenever Manaphy uses its Z move, it just looks, it's terrifyingly adorable. You see some of the other mons, they look absolutely badass when they prep their Z moves. Manaphy, it's cute. But Manaphy using a Hydro Vortex on the Como-O, but Como-O lived the Hydro Vortex. And then it lived the subsequent Surf, and then proceeded to take out Manaphy with clanging scales. Specs clanging scales. Como really likes that move, and BattleRx likes using it on him. But the rest of his team was kind of worn down at that point. Kartana actually doing some good work instead of just getting instantly killed like we've seen before. Zergatry getting a nice kill. So the two Ultra Beasts on BattleRx's team putting in some decent work, better than we've seen them do previously. Como-O being his primary offensive mon, but Swellow. Flame Orb, Facade, Swellow. Oh boy. BattleRx knew this was going to be a threat. It still managed to come in and just clean house. Just click Facade over and over and over again. And it ended up just taking out the rest of BattleRx's team. Swellow, again, not a mon you would expect to be so powerful in League format, and yet we saw Cooper use it to great effect, and now we're seeing Necrostevo continue the trend. Swellow surprising a lot of people, and myself included. It's becoming a really strong, prominent Pokemon in this format, and as we're going to see in the league leaders, spoiler alert, it has risen much higher because of this 4-kill sweep. I can't talk about Swellow enough. What about you?
Yeah, speaking of the Swellow, I know that its buff in this generation didn't come into effect this game, but it just goes to show you that this buff is in its special attack allows us to run two very viable sets in a special attacking set and a physically attacking set, and it makes it very unpredictable for opponents. So definitely a top tier threat. Definitely not going to stay in like tier 4 or whatever it was in last season. We will definitely fix that when it comes to Season 8, but that was a really good game. I think Steve did play as well as he can. There were a few misplays, but I think he played really well with the mons. He knows how to use, like you said, which is the Como and such. But moving on to the next game, it is the San Diego Chimp Chargers up against the San Jose Sharpedos. MV bringing Empoleon, Lando T, Alolan Muck, Cresselia, Dragonite, and Virizion, and Tom is bringing a Zelf finally, Thundurus T, Gardevoir, Porygon 2, Vaporeon, and Celesteela. I just want to start by saying I'm happy to see a Zelf come a little bit. That's a mon I feel like has a lot of potential. I actually, fun fact, I used that Pokemon as my way to get into the GBAs and analysts. I spoke about as Zelf. That's kind of what we had to do, and I'm a huge fan of a Zelf, and I think it has a lot of potential, especially as a Z-mon. But at least he's bringing it. He brought a pretty cool set, so we'll definitely get to that in a moment. But for right now, I'll skip all the the lovey-dovey BS stuff that didn't really make nothing really crazy happen in the beginning. The point where something definitely actually happened is Empoleon living a +2 Thunderbolt off of the Thundurus because of its Wakan Berry, and being thrown into its torrent allowed it to shoot out a really powerful Scald and bring down the Thundy very, very low. But thank God for Tom, it was able to live on a sliver of health, very thankfully to its leftovers. So Empoleon doing a lot of damage, but clearly not enough. Tom is able to get rid of Empoleon. Empoleon does set up the rock, so that's really effective and very efficient for MV, but it is still very good to know that Empoleon is gone when looking at Tom's perspective. Tom has his Celesteela, what am I saying? He has his Celesteela, which I thought was a really good set. Even though Landers came in and intimidated it, that Heavy Slam was doing so much damage. Like, that was really unexpected. I know it was an offensive Scarf set, but that is still, don't tell me that is not a lot of damage for Celesteela. That is a 120 base stab move. So, even under the Intimidate, an offensive Celesteela is a very viable set, and Tom is using that very, very well. Another thing he used very, very well is his combination of Vaporeon and Gardevoir. Envy brought a Crest set, or classic Subcon mindset. He had Ice Beam and Psyshock, if I remember correctly. But Tom was completely prepared for that. He brought Taunt on his Gardevoir and Roar on his Vaporeon, so that Cresselia was not too big of an issue. It didn't really matter too much for Envy because he still had things in the back like Virizion and Dragonite, which were very, very scary for his Gardevoir and his Vaporeon. But in the sense of Tom, he prepared very well for the Cresselia. And for any coaches and any of you guys who are watching, in my humble opinion, when you are playing in a draft league so experienced, such as the GBA, even places like the NPL or whatever, Cresselia, I feel, is not that viable. Now, that sounds crazy. It is such a fat mon. It takes so many hits, do the calcs, but people prepare so much for it. It has become so one-dimensional. All its sets, all it does has become so simple. T-Wave has been nerfed. I just feel, in my opinion, that Cresselia is not as good as it once was, just because people just know what it does at this point. It's so easy to prepare for. You just got to bring Taunt, you just have to bring Toxic, or you have to bring Haze. You have to bring a ground type to take T-Waves. It becomes too simple. You saw so many teams handle Cresselia, whether it was on Steve's team or even Envy's team. So, like I said, in my opinion, Cress is not doing so hot, so I would personally stray away from using it. But if you feel like it can do well in your league, or maybe next season, go ahead. Right after that, though, we do have a Zelf catching off the Alolan Muck, catching off Envy, which is with its natural gift ground. Very clutch set. We know that Envy feels very comfortable with his Alolan Muck, and it is a pretty decent switch into the Zelf, but not after it takes an Ice Punch, and a natural gift ground. So that is a really, really good set, and I was happy to see his Zelf put in work, especially against a Pokemon that Envy holds a lot of pride in, being that Alolan Muck, because it's done so well for him. But really, in the end, all Envy had to do is click Explosion with his Landorus, get a huge chunk of damage off onto that Porygon 2, set up an SD with his Virizion, and just get a sweep from that point, a 4-0 sweep from that point. Well, the game was a 3-0, but Virizion went 4-0, so again, we are seeing the Swords of Justice, Cobalion getting a ton of kills, now Virizion getting kills, we have Keldeo getting kills, and Terrakion got 4 kills, so we have just these Swords of Justice proving that I think are the theme, the kind of mascot of Season 7. So really impressed with this game, but what did you think of it, Spastic?
Dang it. I was really hoping to make the comment about Virizion catching up to its Musketeer brethren, but oh well. The Genies, too, Landorus, Thundurus, and Tornadus, the Incarnate and the Therian forms that have been drafted and that are in this format right now. We're seeing them do a lot of work too. Landorus Therian in this game in particular, like you said, explosion. You don't expect that. Like, Landorus is such a powerful offensive threat. You don't expect it to just explode in your face and then knock itself out. Well, but it ended up really working out, and then Virizion comes in, sets up. I do want to make one point about Cresselia. Yeah, Cresselia is a very one-dimensional mon, and a lot of people know what to expect, know how to prep for it. But there are a lot of mons in draft format in particular that are very one-dimensional, but they're so good at what they do that it doesn't matter that they're one-dimensional. They're almost unparalleled. Example, Entei. A lot of times, Entei is going to bring Choice Band Sacred Fire or Choice Band Extreme Speed. But it's so good in that niche that even if you prep for it, it's still going to hurt like hell. And Cresselia, yeah, it was a little bit nerfed this generation, especially with T-Wave being nerfed, like Paralysis in general especially. But I feel that Cresselia is still good as a defensive mon. it's not going to be like a league MVP by any stretch of the imagination, but it is fat. It can take hits. It can recover. Lunar Dance is a beefed up healing wish. So if the right coach has it, it can really come in handy. Now, even though Kress defected from the Milwaukee Sawbucks over to the San Diego Chimp Chargers, Envy had grand plans for it, but Tom prepped too well for it. And even though Tom did lose, he had a lot of fantastic prep. And he kept the loss to a minimum, although Virizion getting a good setup, mainly because Envy allowed, like, basically Envy kept his team going strong, wore Tom's team down just enough that Virizion could come in and clean house. But this was a narrow loss. Yeah, it was a 3-0, but it was still very well played by Tom. The last game I'm going to talk about, oh god, here we go. The Alolan Athletic versus the San Francisco Giants. Gym Leader Geo.
It's that game of the week, guys.
Oh god, here we go. Gym Leader Geo bringing Salamence, Conkeldurr, Amoonguss, Bronzong, Heliolisk, and Remix, while Callum brings Tyranitar, Rotom-Wash, Shaman, Crobat, Emboar, and Espeon. Now, turn 1. Crobat versus Heliolisk. Callum taking a risky play by clicking U-turn on Heliolisk, knowing very well that it could have been scarfed and it would have outsped. Volt Switch would have taken a huge chunk off of it, but he wasn't. Heliolisk was in fact running specs, so the risky play came off in his favor. He ended up not taking that much damage from Crobat off the top, like right off the bat, but Geo getting the slower Volt Switch, getting momentum in his favor. So both coaches playing well first turn. Defensive Salamence, Wish, Protect, Defog, and Draco Meteor running very defensively, even coming in on T-Tar and causing a lot of havoc for Callum's team. Really throwing off some of his plans, getting a double Protect, for example, scouting Espeon's moves later in the game. So Geo was really on top of his game. We saw him struggle a little bit earlier in the season, but I felt like he was really good on his prep and his prediction game in this game. So Remix coming in and Imposter transforming into Crobat, clicking the Brave Bird, getting a huge chunk of damage off on it. Really helped out, meaning that Crobat couldn't be as bulky and take as many hits as Callum would have liked. And again, here we go with Geo on his prediction game, predicting Crobat to come in when he switched out into Conkeldurr. Crobat came in and he clicked the Ice Punch, taking it out. So there's a decently big defensive threat on Callum's team, taken out of the way. Conkeldurr really doing well in that. So real quick, props to Callum for trying ballsy plays. Going for the head smash on Bronzong instead of Flare Blitz, expecting him to switch out, not expecting him to set up a Trick Room. Props to him for trying, for getting things out there. Unfortunately, Emboar was scarfed, so after the head smash, he had to switch out. But it ended up not hurting him too terribly much. Emboar did get a kill. Bronzong did go down. Tyranitar versus Conkeldurr. You would fully expect Tyranitar to switch out on Conkeldurr because, oh god, 4 times weak. Conkeldurr comes in with a Drain Punch and will just wreck Tyranitar's world. But Callum was running Aerial Ace with Flynium Z. Supersonic Sky Strike Tyranitar, KOing Conkeldurr, and let me just say, oh god, that animation. I do not ever want to see a Tyranitar in the sky plummeting down on top of me. No thank you, do not want. Oh god, no, please no. So, but towards the end, there were a lot of defensive switches, both coaches playing very defensively, very carefully. Again, Geo with defensive Salamence, getting a couple of good intimidates, Wish passing, Wish protecting to keep himself up, Amoongus soaking hits, getting a kill. I mean, ultimately, this game did go down to the timer. I don't think we can go a week without it at this point. Like, we're just going to see more and more timer stalls. But I'm not sure if this is so much a deliberate timer stall, so much as both coaches were playing very defensively and both trying to preserve differential. Although, if the match had gone longer, I feel like Callum could have come out on top. I think he could have come out on top if he hadn't used Healing Wish on Shaman. He would have had a higher differential, but I got his game plan. I understand why he did it. Again, another timer game. Not a huge fan of them. This wasn't one of those, I'm deliberately going to stall out the timer. No, it wasn't that case, but I don't know. This was another one of those. We'll see what happens. We'll see how the fans react. How did you react?
I think this is a game in which most of us will agree that the timer is an issue. Not because timer stalling is an issue, because when you only have 60 minutes to play out a game where there are some, more switches and fatter mons taking hits and healing back up and just a lot of double switching, having that extra 10-20 minutes can make a huge difference. I actually spoke to Spastic right before we started recording. If only they added like 20 more minutes to the timer, I feel like some of these matches could have ended. I mean, you have to give credit where credit is due. I think Callum brought a really cool set with that Tyranitar, like you mentioned, with the Z Aerial Ace on the switch, being able to knock out that Conkeldurr, especially having it, banded with Iron Fist. Drain Punch wrecked his team, so that was good prep on his part. A good play on his part, too, predicting that thing to come in over something else. So I think that was really good, but Geo also preserving what he needed to, keeping the mons around that he needed to. Obviously, we couldn't really see this timer go all the way down because I think both games were post-com, but it was really cool to still see how they played around having the timer go down so quickly. But right now, those are our 8 games of Week 7. We're actually going to flip things around and jump into the kill leaderboard. And starting it off, we have, of course, Cobalion sitting at 14 kills and only 3 deaths. That thing is still at the top. But right on its tail, we have Swellow, the beast that is Swellow, going 10 kills and only 3 deaths. 4 kills behind the Cobalion, which is still a good amount of kills behind the Cobalion. Cobalion is still showing to be, it is a monster this season, absolutely. And still, Crimson Seabed showing he's got Pokemon up his sleeve that can do a lot of damage. The Crocodile right behind the Swellow, still at 10 and 4, even though it wasn't brought this week. Right after that, we do have the Mamoswine and the Terrakion both going for 9 kills and 4 deaths. Jolteon, Volcanion, Thundurus, and Landorus all with 8 kills and a different amount of deaths, and Infernape at 7 kills and 1 death. But Spastic, what are your initial thoughts on how the kill leaderboard is kind of shaping up to be?
We saw a couple of fighting types drift off the leaderboard. Conkeldurr no longer up here. Hawlucha no longer up here. We still see Infernape, Terrakion, and Cobalion, 2 of the Musketeers, or Swords of Justice, whatever you want to call them. I refer to them as the Musketeers. To each their own. So yeah, still very prominent fighting types, but there's still a plethora of other types up here. Now we do see 2 genies up here. We see Thundurus Incarnate and Landorus Incarnate. Thundurus really playing with those Z moves, getting used to great effect. Volcanion, even though it isn't brought a whole lot, it still cemented its place with its sheer power. I'm personally really happy to see Jolteon as high as it is. John really, first of all, he is comfortable with Jolteon. He knows it. He loves it. Jolteon is my favorite evolution, so to see it so high up in the kill leaderboard, knowing how well John has used it and how well it's gotten its kills, that makes me happy. Because a lot of times you see Jolteon, yeah, it's a decently offensive mon, but it's not on the same level as you would expect Volcanion and Landorus Incarnate to be. The the fact that Infernape is sitting at 7-1, and that is the lowest Mon on the kill leaderboard, well, again, this is week 7. The season isn't over. I guarantee we'll see even more changes. Like, we saw Alolan Muck fall off the leaderboard too. So, kind of a drastic change this week. Previously, it didn't change a whole lot, but, you know, with Swellow rising to the top 3, just edging out Crocodile because of its better KD rate, kill death ratio. I don't know, but I guarantee we'll still see a couple of good switches, and who knows, maybe we'll see another Cobalion sweep. Hey, who knows?
That would be absolutely crazy. And lastly, we have the conference breakdown, and as we look at it, we don't have anything too crazy. We have Geo actually snatching up a win, but did not get any differential points because it was a 3-3, unfortunately. Top actually at seven losses. I hate seeing that. I know he can perform well. We've seen him perform well twice, 2 seasons in a row with sand teams, and clearly the electric terrain team is not working out too hot for him. Even though it's not an electric terrain team, I mean, he always has some sort of like weather-based team, so I thought it would be interesting to do that. But yeah, basically around the same thing. We have the Torracats actually picking up a win. We still have, you know, Dan picking up his win, Mono actually picking up his loss, and Envy picking up a win, Chimp also picking up a loss. So we have a few fluctuations there, but pretty much the same thing. And as we get closer, I believe we have 5 more weeks left. We'll kind of see where, you know, the teams kind of slip and slide, although placements are kind of gonna sit where they are. But what do you think?
Chase only losing 1-0, that's not going to hurt him too much unless he just gets absolutely swept swept later on. He's managing to hold his spot high. George, yeah, picking up only a 1-0 against Chimp, but working his way back up instead of just, yeah, he's coming back. He was the Season 6 champion, and then he was kind of struggling for a little bit early on, but now he's working his way back, especially with Miss Magius doing really well for him. Envy, he's Lord Envy. What really can we say about that? So the division breakdown is looking really good. Again, not a whole lot changing, but it could happen. Any week, it could just drastically change. Could in some cases, although sadly, I don't think we'll see Tup immediately rise to the top unless everybody in his division just gets 6-0'd every week,
and he has to start 6-0ing people.
Yeah. So, you know,
but yeah,
we get a better idea of what things are going to be like. I mean, for the conferences that are close, we may see that change up, but for the other conferences that are pretty distinct in who the leader is and who is at the bottom, that's probably going to stay that way, especially this late in the season. But again, only week 7. We've still got many more weeks to go, many more matches to play, more upsets, more sweeps, more surprises, and we'll still have to see a lot more surprising sets. Like, for example, there was one surprise set that I forgot to mention, and I feel terrible for not remembering it. I had it in my notes and overlooked it. Sub Endeavor Keldeo. Duncan substituting, getting its health down to the point of the Salic Berry went off and outsped. Didn't really think it mattered against Primarina, given that it's so slow anyway. But it was an interesting set that's not that conventional, but it ended up working out, bringing down Primarina to the point where he could just kill it easily, taking a big a decent offensive, bulky offensive threat on Lars' team down. So we're seeing more unconventional sets, and I do really enjoy that, because yeah, you can see your typical Iron Fist Conkeldurr, and you know it's going to do well. You can see your AV Mamoswine with its typical offensive moves, and you know it's going to do well. But when you see the unconventional sets and they actually work, that's some heat.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot more to see from these coaches, and it is going to be very exciting to see what happens. And I'm very excited to see what happens in playoffs. But other than that, that has been the weekly recap for week 7, as we just hit 55 minutes on this recap. Clearly, you guys can see that we like talking about these games. So catch us next week for week 8 of season 7 of the GBA to see what happens then. And yeah, we'll catch you guys then. See ya.
I'm going to drink some water because my throat is so dry. Oh god, my voice hurts. But aloha, everybody.